So if you didn't already visualize, which I did hundreds of times, that scenario going sideways, then you're already kind of on your heels. So start thinking about where you're going, what you're doing, and visualizing it going sideways so you're prepared and mentally accepting the fact that you might have to fight for your life.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes. Our informational content cannot address all dangerous situations and cannot guarantee your survival or prevent injuries when the unexpected happens. The decision to carry a firearm, either for recreation or for personal defense, carries the risk and potential for injury and or death. Therefore, it is advised that you seek out and acquire proper training before using a firearm or any firearm-related product.
What are some self-defense techniques?
What would happen if there was a global internet outage?
What should I do if I hear shots ringing out?
Or what I should do if there's a major terrorist attack?
What should I have? What's the best?
What should I do?
What does that look like?
What would you recommend? Is there anything I could do?
All right, guys, welcome back to Dangerous Questions. I hope you guys have been loving the content we've been putting out. We've been getting great feedback still. And it is important that if you guys are running through these scenarios, send them in. If you've got questions, send them in. There's nothing that's going to throw us through a loop, especially when it comes to tactical scenarios, self-defense, what you're carrying, and even mindset and faith. And all those things are something that we want to bring value to. This episode is specifically about bugging out. And I say that because it's become a term that's become very, very, very well known. What's my bug out kit? What am I going to do if we have to bug out? I personally don't like that term. And it, to me, doesn't really add much value. It's much like hitting the panic button on your key fob. It's like, I don't even want to say that word. Why am I suggesting that we should panic, right? Like, ditch the button, black it out. Like, why do I need that in order to get me in the right state of mind? So bugging out is much the same way. Like, I love the term go bag. Maybe we just have different levels of go bags. I have go bag 1, go bag 2, go bag 3. And those are different scenarios. Those are either I'm going to need it right away, immediately. Overseas we had bailout bags. If I had to bail out of the vehicle and we got hit by an IED or we did something else, I've at least got that 1 day, 2 day worth of supplies that I can push into a village and know that I can take care of myself. So we're going to run through some bug out scenarios, some go scenarios. Really, it's just preparing ourselves with a state of mind, a state of faith, and an outfit of gear that's going to allow us to get through that scenario. There's so much going on here. And honestly, at the end of the day, it really does come down to context. And I don't want to beat you over the head with context this whole time because I'm going to be like, well, context. It's important to understand that each scenario is going to be different. And I'll do my best to frame that out so you walk away with some key principles that you can apply to your life in the event that you do need to either fortify your situation or get out of town. We'll have a solution for that and stuff that you can apply to your life. This is Dangerous Questions, an Ironclad original. Let's get going. All right, so the first question we have is a written question. And again, a lot of people asking these types of questions from a big overview perspective. I live in a very big city. If the worst case scenario happens, what should I do? And should I get out of town? How do I know when it's time to bug in versus bug out? Okay, so how do I know? What's my trigger to realize I have to get going right now? I have to grab what I can, get my family in a vehicle, and go. Just like I talked about the underwater scenario, if you're by yourself, this is really easy to solve. If you have a family with you, say if it's in the middle of the day, you got half your kids in daycare, one's in school, your wife's at work, whatever your scenario is, it's unique. So you must start to create some context and some planning around your specific scenario. Don't blow off your unique case. You have to actually confront it, be intimate with it, and say, sit down with your wife, sit down with yourself, take some notes and say, what does an average day look like for me? If it's in the morning, midday, afternoon, how am I going to handle each one of these scenarios? We are getting better and better at technology. And I use a hurricane for an example. If you live in Florida, if you live in the South, you know that technology has improved greatly over the last 20 years to be able to say, hey, this hurricane's developing, this is the type of category it is, this is the directed path, and we could probably shift our resources, or maybe we need to plan to leave, or it's going to miss us. The technology's gotten so good, we've been able to avoid quite a bit in the last 20 years. So what does that mean for us now? I believe that technology has gotten better to the point where you're going to be able to tell these evolving things, even if it's word of mouth. So you talk about worst case scenario, say we don't have comms. Comms is gone. Well, we're going to know pretty quick if it's affecting us immediately. Like, hey, I just saw a bomb go off in the city next door. Like, that's not good. What's our play here? You know, you start talking through these scenarios. Like, did you hear anything? What's going on? Is there multiple attacks? Is it only one bomb? Did a plane crash? You know, what is it that we're being confronted with? That's going to allow us to respond and act accordingly. So be intuitive with this. Without technology, if it's not exactly like a hurricane, it doesn't have that perfect little path with a perfect category, and a disaster happens, and the end of the world scenario starts to take place, you've got to use your instinct. Instinct is going to play a critical role for you guys in acting right, whether you need to stay or whether you need to go. You're going to feel that pressure, and you've got to listen to that instinct. Again, if you're choosing to get out of town, that starts to ask a whole list of questions. How am I gathering my family up? Do I have rally points set? Do I have the right gear to get in the car? There's all these other elements, which we're going to cover in some of them in this episode, but it just begs the question, are you visualizing these things? Are you prepared enough? The last thing that I'll say about bugging out or getting out of town or shifting gears or going across the border, are you thinking through what you're taking with you? Because I know most people in the material sense are going to be attached to things. Even an event where you need to get out of your work building, you know, what's in your bag? Is it so valuable that you're going to hesitate when it's time to move? And that's what I want to get rid of right now. I'm hoping that you leave this episode with the thought process of, you know what? I've already detached myself from what's in that bag. My computer, my phone, my keys. Like, it doesn't matter what's in there if somebody kicks down the door and starts shooting. I don't need to go after that. And if I already made the decision to mentally disattach, then I can move effectively. It's the same thing with your house. If you're like, we've got to get the kids and go, don't sit there thinking about what you should take. You should already know where your bag is, what exactly you're going to grab, and move. That could be the difference of saving your life and putting yourself in the best situation possible. Great question. Let's get to the next one. All right, written question. I've heard you talk on some other podcasts about your background and situations involved safe houses. Did you or any of your buddies get into a situation where you had to bribe your way out of when getting to a secure location? What do I need to know if I find myself in a similar situation getting out of town? Okay, so we're in a situation where our movement's being stopped and we're having to talk through where we're going. Now, I can tell you, I've dealt with a lot of crooked people in my career, especially when we're on the road. You know, is this Taliban? Is it not Taliban? You know, is this a crooked cop? Is it not a crooked cop? Those have come up time and time and time again. And again, what I just said, and the last thing about bugging out, is you've got to use your instinct. Now, I will say, in those unique circumstances, I would give it 85% of the time I was using my interpreter, right? So this is where trust in whoever's speaking for you really comes into play. And if you're in a different country, and I know we're talking about here, and I'll get back to that in a second, but it really comes down to trusting that person. What's their instinct? Are they going to speak well? Have they been through scenarios themselves? Can they speak well enough to not get nervous in a situation? And when I think about that, it's kind of like, does this person have life experience? And I've always vetted my interpreters, always. It's like, what can you get us through? Do I have the confidence? Am I better off just speaking English, or can I trust that you're going to speak in this language about the right thing and not put us in hot water? Again, your instinct in these scenarios is really, really going to matter. The other thing that I'll say is negotiations. All of these things have always come down to negotiating. How can I talk through what I'm trying to get out of this? And ultimately, you're trying to get through something. If this is a barrier, or if this is somebody just stopping you on the road, again, we're going to talk about barricades in a second. So I'm going to kind of put that aside for right now. We'll talk about somebody actually physically stopping you. But right now, this might be one of those awkward scenarios where, like, man, there's a lot of guys around They're all armed, and they're not really trying to take me to another location, but they want something. And that's the thing about negotiating, is that can you articulate or question them enough to figure out what they want? So in the context of they want something, they're stopping your movement, and I'm just going to say, what is it that they're looking for? What exactly is it? Is it me that they're looking for, or are they just looking to get paid off? So negotiating, I mean, I don't care if you grew up going to a flea market like I did when I was a kid trying to, barter for G.I. Joes. Like little things like that throughout your life, making an offer on a home, making an offer when you go to a dealership. Each one of these scenarios, by the way, that you are interacting with other humans for what they want and what you want are going to help you get to the point of negotiating through these briberies really, really well. And you're going to give them as little as you possibly can. There's always a push and pull there. The last thing that I'll say about this, guys, is that ultimately it could mean that they want you. And so there needs to be an acceptance and a realization that I might actually have to fight for my life here. And that might pop up in a matter of seconds, or it might pop up in a matter of minutes, where you're like, where's this going? Like, are they going to let us go or are they not? Instinct is telling me this might get really bad really quick. And I've been in those scenarios overseas where I'm literally looking around like, okay, I've got 2 guns on me and I can draw these things to my back and to my side in probably about 5 seconds or less. And I've got 4 dudes surrounding the windows, tapping my window with an AK, pointing it in the back of my head. Like, that was a real scenario. And so I'm thinking that it's going to go to that point. So if you didn't already visualize, which I did hundreds of times, that scenario going sideways, then you're already kind of on your heels. So start thinking about where you're going, what you're doing, and visualizing it going sideways so you're prepared and mentally accepting the fact that you might have to fight for your life. That'll at least give you permission to get to the other side. Everything else, minus fighting for your life, it is a negotiation, right? I might just be able to give this cop $100 and I'm on my merry way. And they're not going to give me a hard time. Maybe it's just a kind of the interaction, a soft brush up where a guy's just seeing how much he can take. That's the other element of it. And again, this is a lot to talk about in this scenario, but hopefully you take a couple of key principles away from what to do, what not to do, why negotiating is important, and ultimately being prepared to fight for your life if that scenario happens. All right, great question. Let's get to the next one. Have you ever had to get through an intentional roadblock? So this is the follow-on to that roadblock. If there is a situation where non-law enforcement personnel are blocking a road, what's the best way to get through it or around it? And again, I've been in other countries where law enforcement isn't always good. They're getting paid off from somebody else to be in on the same thing, and they're stopping you because they look the part. So don't necessarily let law enforcement be what triggers your mind. Now, in the States, yes, of course, I feel very good about the level of security that we have and the level of presence that we have, I should say, about our law enforcement in this country. And I really do. I know a lot of law enforcement guys that are giving their heart, giving everything they've got to do the right thing. Are there bad guys out there? Yeah, you name it. That's across the board. That's everywhere. That's in the church. That's in law enforcement. That's in any corporation. No matter where you go, you're going to find people that are bad apples. But when I look at something like this, that's a roadblock, if we really isolate this in a vacuum and say, look, these are non-law enforcement, they're unmarked, they're in regular plain clothes, and they look aggressive. There's scenarios you can watch over and over and over again on YouTube, guys. If we're thinking about a roadblock, first of all, we're in a vehicle. And I always try to remind people to give yourself permission that your vehicle is a weapon. I drive predictively. And what I mean by that is that I'm always looking 3, 4, 10 cars in front of me on the highway, on the regular road. Because when you do defensive driving, and when you train for what I did in the military, whether I was driving in convoys or in low-vis scenarios doing surveillance, I need to be able to get out of that bad situation quickly. If I get made and all of a sudden now I'm being blocked, if I didn't predict where my out was, well, now I'm stuck. I don't know. That's like using the word panic too, right? I'm never stuck. I'm never fully stopped. But at least for a moment, it's pausing where I'm blocked in, back, left, right, front. Well, now I need to get really creative with what I'm doing. Now, if I was predictively thinking about how I was driving on the road, I'm going to be able to stop and mitigate a lot of those scenarios just by seeing it coming. Like, that's strange. I'm driving down this road and there's 2 cars parked at an angle at a stoplight. That doesn't seem right to me. And I immediately start slowing down if I sense that. Maybe it's just somebody broken down. Maybe it's somebody pulling out jumper cables, or maybe it's actually a cartel member with 4 of the dudes in the bushes waiting to ambush you and rip you out of your vehicle. But I just need to predictively think. If you guys do that, you're going to see how it's going to set you up for success. What's not a scenario of predictively thinking? It's doing this, guys. It's on the road, no matter where you're at, driving, looking at your phone, texting your friend, or checking Instagram, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. All of a sudden, I'm trapped in this scenario with nowhere to go. It could have been avoided. In each one of these scenarios where we're talking about bugging out and evading, they all kind of play in with each other. They all kind of play into being prepared. We're going to talk about having the right vehicle, having the right mindset with the vehicle. It's a weapon. If I find myself in one of these situations, I need to be predictively thinking about what to do next. And if it really is life-threatening, again, what's the context? Are these guys getting ready to run up to my car with an automatic weapon? Is that the case? Or are these guys just kind of seeing what they can get out of me? Maybe they'll get lucky with a car, or they're just looking for a soft target. Somebody that's weaker, that they're just looking to say, get out of your car. Okay, they get out of their car, take their car, now they go sell it, on the black market. Whatever the case may be, I need to read that scenario and be prepared for the worst case possible. Now, if I'm in the States, I'm carrying, I've got my truck, and those are really 2 good assets that could get me out of a mini gunfight and through a lot of bad scenarios. Now, if I'm in a city that I'm visiting for a day and I've got my rental with me, and typically I'm carrying no matter where I go, but say, for instance, that I'm not in that scenario and firearms are presented, what's the level of threat? How can I mitigate that risk to myself and somebody else? How can I break contact? There's a lot of videos out there, even guys being like, okay, I can't go forward, but can I go backwards? Did I stop myself too much where I can't get out of this and turn around? Always look for your out in a roadblock scenario where your life is on the line and the threat is imminent. Use your vehicle as a weapon. Crash through if you have to. If most roadblocks that I see can be punched through. So if you're already identifying like, whoa, those are automatic weapons, and there's no way that I'm going to get out behind me and this gets real really quick, I might choose in that scenario to punch through, where I'm not going to start speeding right away where I'm going, 100 miles an hour, because they're already going to see like, oh, this guy's trying to go through. Now I'm going to start shooting at him. Maybe I wait to the last second and I'm punching the gas and finding the weakest point in their barricade and just punching through, trying to keep myself covered and run to that. Again, what's the scenario? If it's imminent, I've got to make a decision. A lot to chew on there, but, review this video and go watch other barricaded videos. You're going to start thinking about what could happen to you. Be predictive in your driving. Great question. I'm sure it's a scenario we all think about when we're on the road, especially traveling overseas. We're like, what is this barricade? I mean, I've had multiple scenarios I've been through. All right, let's get to the next question. And we are live on Dangerous Questions with my man, Clint.
Hey,
what is up, dude?
It's been a minute. How you doing, buddy?
It has been a minute. It's great to see you, man. You're busy as always.
Yeah, you too. Look at you, getting on the camera way more often than usual.
Yeah, man. No, it's awesome. It's this series has been great, and I appreciate you coming on, dude. I was just talking about your new book, A Guide to Escaping Evasion. So you're always coming out with something, man. What was your main focus of that book? Why did you decide to write that?
Yeah, initially, the book really was like an answer to the Ukrainian issue, right? Like, imagine if a country rolls in and just decides to take over or roll to our borders, whatever the case is. And then it grew from there. It was crazy because Ukraine was the only thing that now you've got the Chinese threat and balloons in the middle. You've got terrorists coming over the southern border. I mean, it's such a myriad of threats now that when you sit back and look at it, like, you're kind of crazy not to get a little prepared for the worst case scenario. So the book really does a good job breaking down basic soldiering skills, small unit tactics, and then the last part of it is all about sabotage. So giving the average person citizen soldier skills just in case somebody decides to put boots on the ground around here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys out there, putting good information out. Honestly, it's something that the average citizen just doesn't get exposed to. What would have been basic knowledge, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. It was just like, oh, my dad taught me that, or, I knew that. Like, it's always good for people to brush up on that now, and especially the people that care. So I look forward to digging into it. I haven't actually read it yet, but I can kind of understand the essence of what you put into it. So good stuff.
Yeah, good. And you got a copy coming your way pretty soon. So you'll have one soon. As you know, you get busy, but I still try to make sure it's a priority each day, part of my workouts, right? As long as you roll it all together and package it like that, then you're going to keep your reps going, like you say, and reps are the most important piece, and concentrate on the things that you feel like will get you out of a dangerous situation, and, do the best you can, as much as you can, or time will permit.
So when you did 100 Deadly Skills, and this is, the Bruce Lee, methodology with identifying and distilling down what's most important out of everything in that book, or even isolating that experience and that journey, because you didn't even put everything in the book. There was some elements of that you learned along the way. But what's the one or two key takeaways from that book that you're like, this is going in my brain forever, or I'm not going to ever let this go because it's going to help you?
Oh, man. So much. Number one, de-escalate, right? Everybody I talked to, the common answer was, if you can just steer away from it altogether, then you should, right? With de-escalation, right? It's like the nonviolent posture, whether it's negotiation, the thinking man, crossed arm, whatever it is that you choose, make sure you know what it is, understand that it's a great Trojan horse, and then make sure you train it, right? If it's negotiation, I've got one hand up, one hand back. I can throw something out there. I can still defend myself. There's so many options once you get your hands up, preventing you from just being this, victim, right? And at the same time, patting the airway and saying, hey, I don't want any trouble, and create distance and get away. That was definitely one big common denominator across all of you guys. Probably second to that is understanding that reactionary gap, right? Which goes hand in hand with distance, right? So as people get closer, you're kind of peeling off all the layers of protection that you have, and whoever strikes first usually wins. So once somebody gets inside the gap, unfortunately, you have to be ready to make the move before somebody makes it on you. But if you're doing all this, because this is for the cameras, this is for the court, you want to make sure it's up, because that way, if you do something, you feel threatened and you got all the right answers, then you'll probably be okay. But man, every single one of you guys put out just incredible information, and having the chance to put it all into that book and lay it all out, everything from Hell's Angels to special operators. I mean, it turned out great. It's definitely one of my favorite books so far.
No, it was awesome, man, to be able to do that and distill it down to each one of those moves. And, I think it's important for people listening. That's why I asked, because I don't know if you've ever been asked that, but like distilled down, that's the starting point. Everybody always wants the ninja moves. And even though you've got a couple, really it comes down to mastering those basic skills. And if anybody, is taking anything away, it's like, you want to avoid it. Everybody watching has something to lose. If we can de-escalate and change gears and shift the energy somewhere else. But if it starts to come into that, well, then being predictive and knowing that reactionary gap and putting that framework up is going to help, whether you end up being able to de-escalate or have to engage. So that's just good. I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that. So
yeah.
Now the dangerous questions part. So you're getting to do a live video. What dangerous questions do you have? I'm excited to hear what you have to say, by the way, because I'm like, what's Clint going to ask me?
I was like, I'm going to ask Dom a question. Let me see. I would love for you to talk more about the importance of flanking, because believe it or not, when I did Combat Edition, you were other than I had a boxer, right? He was a silver medalist, professional boxer, right? You concentrated more about flanking, stacking, getting, turning it into a one-on-one fight, even if it's just for a split second. So how important is flanking, considering you were one of more than a dozen guys? You were like one of the only ones that really concentrated on it when me and you got together. And I felt like, man, this is like one of the most important points when you are facing multiple adversaries, you're on your own, you have no choice but to fight. Yeah, I'd love for you to, hey, tell us about flanking and its importance when you have multiple adversaries standing in front of you.
Awesome. This is such a great question, and to highlight this for people too, because today in mixed martial arts, we actually don't get to see flanking used really much at all. And the reason being is that because there's one-on-one. And so they know that they're fighting, they know they're engaged, and they also have a controlled environment. So you don't get to see a guy go in the ring and get on the side of him and then re-attack. You know, there's no improvised weapons, there's no environment to be able to deal with. So should cause people to kind of think about this from a standpoint of like, well, it's much different in the real world when you're not in the ring. Even in boxing, you get offline, you see Tyson shift his feet and he'll go boom, boom, and then he'll pop over. And that's a level of flanking, but it's not being utilized in the same sense that I'm saying, because it really can change the dynamic of the fight. And when you're looking at these close quarter scenarios and you're wrapping up with 3 or 4 dudes, it's absolutely essential to know how to get offline and do it quickly. And a lot of the times, I don't want to spend any more than 1 or 2 strikes in one spot or 1 or 2 shots. I'm gonna grab, clinch, shoot, move, because it's gonna keep me moving where they're constantly trying to lean forward to get me. And that's why it's so important for people to understand that if you're not adding flanking as a part of your combative base or your martial arts base, you really are missing out on a key element. So it's a great question. And I think I would highlight it to people to say, careful about what you're not seeing. And that's not seeing flanking. I think probably judo guys, maybe jujitsu, are probably using it a little bit because they have to do an arm drag to kind of get to the side. So they're kind of seeing the element of flanking from a one-on-one perspective. Again, when you're in a combat scenario, what I mean is them being in the ring, you might see that less because they know you're coming at them, they know what you're doing. But then you take that into a combative environment like the real world scenario out in the street, and you're going to have to know how to flank. You're going to have to know how to get over that curb, get around the car, and move. The other thing I think that probably holds people back is when you think flanking, you think small unit tactics. So like, okay, I've got an adversary right in front of me, we've got a contact, and now I'm going to keep them distracted, pull them out, and then move a guy to the left or move a unit to the left. That's kind of basic flanking. But if we can take that principle and use it very violently in a hand-to-hand scenario, it literally can be the difference of you winning a fight between, 2 and 10 guys and getting out of there alive.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I loved it. I thought you did a great job explaining. Obviously, you're able to rattle off nomenclature and also do the technique so well. It's like you're a pro, man. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it. You got anything else? Anything else we need to discuss? You're out there changing the world, dude. I appreciate what you're doing out there.
No, I appreciate you. Yeah, I thought we were going to talk bug out. I saw bug out in the notes for the show, so I'm ready, man. Let's talk bug out.
All right, so that's an element of what we're talking about in the series. I mean, we've had everything from what do we use for gear. I think that's a scenario that is talked about a lot. Almost to, I don't want to say exhaustion, but there's a lot of good information out there. People can go find really quickly. What do I put in my bag? What do I need to be ready for? There were questions that were asking, hey, how do I know when to stay put and leave? What's the difference between the two? And I would love to hear your breakdown of that from a family perspective. What have you really applied to saying, okay, I know that this is the end of the world scenario and I've got to move. What methodology are you using to walk through that, or at least plan for it?
Yeah. Well, for almost every single book, I make sure I include the philosophy of bug out and bug in, because they're just like you mentioned, there's situations where I'm not going to run. I know my blueprint better than a bad guy. So I'm going to stay put. I'm going to keep the lights out. I'm going to let that guy trip over his feet, trip over the furniture, and then take advantage of him when it benefits me, right? So bugging in is one thing, bugging out is another. Knowing and going through those protocols very quickly isn't rocket science, right? You just got to play out different scenarios on when you think you should create distance and space in order to increase survivability, or when you think you have the advantage and you can stand your ground. That's number one. But when you break out bug out bags and that whole discussion, there's really 2 big macro things you should look at. Number one is purpose. Okay, what is the purpose? And then what is the content of that bag? Okay, so how do you break out purpose? Well, that's going to be environment, situation, capability. What are the environments, right? Is it in the mountains or to the beach or somewhere in the middle? Is it hot? Is it cold or somewhere in the middle? Are you at home, your office, or in your vehicle, right? That's your environment. Situation, be realistic. What is the highest probability of crisis that I could potentially face doing whatever it is I'm going to do? And list those out. And these days with Google and AI, you can just type in, whatever the threat is for the area you're going to or the area you live in, and it'll give you an entire list of issues, right? So those situations you've got to be cognizant of and make sure you look them up and make sure you're smart on it. And then, of course, capability of yourself, right? Okay, what am I good at? What am I bad at? Let's fix it. And then capability of your gear. Do I know how to work this? Do I know the knobology, the functionality, even when the lights are out? Because, as you know, and I know, if you don't really know your gear, then it's going to fail you. So that's purpose. If you answer those three things, environment, situation, capability, you're off to a good start. Now, when we talk about the content of a bug out bag or whatever it is, once again, I like threes, right? So the three things you should have is save my life, right? What are the things to save my life? What are the things to support my life? And then what are the things to defend my life? That's your common ground right there, no matter what you do. So when we talk about extending life, right? It's easy. More life support, Life support would be, food, water, comms, navigation. You can include a lot of stuff into there, right? Then you've got, save a life, and that's medical. So we use the acronym MARCH, right? We all learned it from 18 Delta. It's a great acronym to build out a medical kit. So, M is for massive hemorrhage or big bleeders, right? A is airway, R is respiration, C is circulation, H is head injury and hypothermia. So if you have the things to build that out, now you're good on saving life. But you probably want to think about other little things, anaphylactic, like allergic reactions and EpiPen. Antibiotics to fight infection, because let's face it, if you look at every war, it was the infections that killed more people than the actual wounds themselves, right? And then, of course, any special meds, right? Whatever, maybe you've got some kind of lifelong chronic illness that you got to take meds for. Make sure you have those on standby too. So we've answered the question of how do I, life support, which is your food, water, comms, nav. How do I save a life? And then defend a life, right? That's angry people and angry animals. So that's your guns, your knives, your bear spray, right? So there you go. You got purpose. You've got the content. Purpose. If you're really looking at the environment, situation, and your capabilities, and then under your content or what you're putting in the bag, you're looking at what saves a life, what supports the life, and what defends the life, then you're good to go. And that's kind of how I look at things. And that's how I've pretty much broken it out in all the books.
Yeah, no, that's solid. And I think, if people go through that method, if they go through that, they pretty much got everything they need. The problem is, like you said, people don't know their gear. They kind of think about these things, but they don't do anything about it. And I can't stress enough to other people that, hey, if they want to be better at something, awesome. Some people worry about things, I think, that aren't realistic or really worth worrying about. But if if it's something that's keeping you up at night, it's like, go through the motions. What happens if for 2 weeks you just said, let's pretend this was the end of the world scenario? What would that look like for you? If you got out of your routine and you said, I'm just going to pretend like this is it. We're going to stop going to the store. I'm going to stop getting this. Do you have the right medicine for your kids that they need? Because I think the EpiPen's a big one. People don't think about that. All of a sudden you have a reaction to something and there's no medical support around whatsoever. And that one thing could have mitigated a ton of risk. But if you don't walk through those scenarios, you're not really going to accept that you need them. So that's just my encouragement to people. Take that advice, what Clint just talked about, but now apply it, visualize it. Make sure you're walking through like, hey, if we leave right now, do we have what we need? I think it's great. Do you have any type of like rally point stuff that you do with family, friends? Do you have anything like that mapped out where you're like, hey, this is a point where we're going to meet, no comm scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, I try to pace everything as we learned early on in our careers. Pace is just, man, one of the best acronyms to apply to just about everything, which is have a primary, have an alternate, a contingency, and a emergency/escape, right? And if you do that with your routes and along the way have rally points, I feel like too on these planning, whether I'm doing it I've done this for, schools, nonprofits, right? And when you do it, keep it simple. Make sure it's landmarks that are easily identifiable. Because once again, you turn out the lights or you add adrenaline or there's fire, chaos. People aren't going to remember like these little itty bitty things. You got to make it simple, make it big, landmarks like the tree line, right? Get to the tree line, take cover, right? Wait to do a head count once you're there. Or it could be, like in our mount situations, you want at least 1 to 2 layers of buildings between you and the X that you were on, right? Just move to those buildings and then consolidate, head count. Okay, we're good to go. So I think if you just keep your rally points super simple, major landmarks, easy identifiable stuff, even at night, then you'll probably be good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this is your forte. I mean, you talk about this stuff every day. So, I think it's something people are more and more concerned about. We've talked about faith before, just on the surface, but I always have, the mindset piece to it too, because we can talk about, people worrying about all these scenarios unfolding, but what's the mindset going into it? I know I'm applying faith first. I'm trusting in God, like, Lord, you put me here. This is the scenario. So what mindset are you applying to when it comes to like worrying about what could unfold?
Yeah, on the mindset side, I think, resiliency is everything I kind of focus on, obviously. And almost just like you, very skills based, right? And making sure that you're training those skills, and knowing that, the goal is for good to conquer evil at any given time. And we're all here in this universe together. And we know that it's probably 50-50, whether you like it or not, good and bad in any given situation or moment. And I think as long as your probabilities are at least even or thinking in terms of worst case scenario, I'm outnumbered, I'm outgunned, I'm taking severe blows to the head. Okay, those are the types of things you need to be what-ifing on a regular basis so that if something bad does happen, you've already run the scenario, you've already made the decisions. And so in that tactical decision world, I've made this decision 100 times already in a clinical environment where I had plenty of time and zero stress, right? Now I've got zero time and a ton of stress. All I have to do is act it out now because I've already been thinking about it. Now I'm just acting. And the odds are you're going to be good to go because you're not just making decisions under stress. You're acting out decisions that you've already thought about several times in a clinical environment. It could be when you're sitting at the restaurant, sitting on that, in that Uber, whatever it is, wherever life takes you, you just take a couple of seconds, you what if it, make the decisions in your mind of what you would do. Now, if it really does happen, you're acting them out. You're putting time on your side because as well as I do, time can either be an adversary or it can be an ally. And we definitely want it to be an ally. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, and the key point there is reps. Like if you're visualizing something you want to get good at, if it has to do with bugging out or bugging in, it's like, great, we had the conversation, we've identified some good stuff, but now rep it out. If we're not visualizing it and utilizing it, then what good is it really going to be? Ultimately, there will be people that listen to this and never do a dang thing, right? And that's unfortunate, but at the same time, I would still tell that person, trust your instincts and do the best you possibly can when it happens. Even if it were to happen right when you walk out the door right now, what do you have that you can utilize to use to your advantage, to be able to apply to that environment? I have 5 children, so every time I'm thinking about any type of bug out scenario, it becomes pretty complex pretty quick. I keep it simple, but it can be like, wait, everybody's spread out, now I got to pull in. So it's not just as simple as me breaking contact or saying I'm just going to leave town. It's not about me at that point. I will give my life to make sure that all of my children are safe, secure, and given every opportunity they can to be free. So ultimately, it does change the dynamic a little bit. But any final thoughts, brother?
No, man, I just love everything you're doing. Always have, big fan. And I always wish you, all the success. Keep on going.
Thanks, man. You do the same, dude. You're doing great. God bless you. And keep crushing what you're up to, dude. It's awesome to see.
Back at you, buddy. Thanks for having me, Dom.
Peace, of course. All right, guys. So having Clint on was awesome. Just hearing his experience and his application of what he's doing. He's obviously got a lot of great content out there. We've worked together. He's worked with some subject matter experts. And again, that's what makes guys like Clint great, is that he knows who to go to get the right skills and then apply it in a way that you guys can use it and understand it and apply it to your life. If you get the book, you're going to get something out of it. I guarantee that. I could open up the book and find something. So this episode has been a lot about bugging out, and there's a lot of things to worry about, to not worry about, gear, no gear, but hopefully you're finding something to apply to your life. Hey guys, what's up? This segment of Dangerous Questions is brought to you by Snake Staff Systems. If you guys have heard me talk about them before, they make low-profile tourniquets, and I always say there's no excuse not to have a tourniquet on you, and these guys nailed it with being able to have something on you at all times. Go check them out at snakestaffsystems.com. No excuses. Always, my favorite part, we're going to get into breaking down these scenarios together and watching each one as it has to do with what we've discussed in this scenario. Let's watch the first one. So this is one of the scenarios we talked about. We're on the road. This apparently was over the border in Mexico. Clearly have what it looks like to be a cartel. The light's blocked. Now, this was what I was talking about predictive thinking. That guy's being offensive. He utilizes the other car to his right, which you wouldn't have been able to see because you're kind of like, why didn't that guy in the truck come at him? They're making maneuvers to try to stop this guy, and he doesn't stop trying to think. That is the key thing here. Blockade, movement, keep the vehicle moving. Don't stop. Find an out. That could have been bad really quickly. You saw that there were other vehicles behind him. If he went all the way up to that truck and didn't give himself any space, and then all the vehicles were able to get up on back of him, that's it. He would have had a very, very tight scenario. Now, if you give me an inch, if you give me a half inch in this scenario and they block me in, I am going to get out of there. I'm going to smash my way through. And right here, he made the decision to go backwards. But I will say that right there to the right would have probably been a great weak point to punch his vehicle through and have a clear shot moving forward. And that's what I'm talking about blowing through, punching through the barricade. If you feel the pressure coming on and you're being predictive and you're like, this just doesn't look right, use the car as a weapon. Don't stop moving to get to this scenario. We could pick a ton of intersections, a ton of places. When you're somewhere that's unknown, do your best to use your maps and avoid going down dead-end roads where you go down and you're like, shoot, I can't get out now. I can't turn around. If you study your maps and at least have a route, it's so simple to do, guys. If you're in Mexico, if you're in another country, if you're in a bad neighborhood, pull your map out. Start using Google. Start looking at what's around you. Be like, okay, this is a shot. I'd rather pause for a second or even pull over for minutes and I'm like, man, weird. Did you see back there? There was guys that were pulled over that looked like they were eyeing us. Let's just pull over where we know where we're going. We got lost to get turned around. Okay, we know this is an area that's going to get where we want to go and start following the plan. Again, heard Clint Emerson talking about, having a primary, having an alternate, having those parts of your path that are going to help you get to where you're trying to go. When in doubt, in a scenario like this, life is on the line. Looks like they're going to try to either you take your family, for your life. And I want to realize that violence here is going to be the key. I want to be able to visualize. I don't care what car, be in a Lamborghini. I don't care what, smash vehicle through you and whatever stop gaining my freedom back to the security that both myself and my family deserve. So that's this scenario. A lot of barricade scenarios out there on YouTube. A few of them. In your mind, what do you do? Even when you're driving home, when you wake up tomorrow, think through when you're on the highway or stop, What would I do? Where am I at? One of the main things I think I want you guys to walk away with is always a level of distance car in front of you. That is a life skill that never goes away. Always have a car of distance in front of me or because I still maneuver and gain a decent amount of momentum. I mean, there was just broke that for a reason. You know, when you're right lane and you've next to you and you got behind you trying to get in that, it's like you really see the guys about the curb. Courtesy, I'm just my mirrors and like, okay, this guy go, and I got a car in front of me. Again, I know the rule, but I know why I did it. I was just trying to be this to the guy behind me. Other than that, I'm not really gonna push up. Now, if I thought that guy came out of nowhere and he was already following me for a while, I'm not gonna continue to get behind me. But I had known from pattern he was. So things to consider, a lot to analyze. Do it while your daily drive. Help you and potentially. All right, let's get the video. All right, this one is a carjacking. They're in the now. We're going off here before this. Really letting them, hey, we're serious. Guns are live. Loaded. Now, I had to pause for a second. I just want to make before we even finish watching the video. If you call yourself a protector and anybody with any dignity in your soul jumping out of this vehicle, I don't even know if it's a dude or not. Hiding behind this person, and one of the things that you're going to see is that kids end up out of this vehicle. There's a guy that jumps out of the vehicle and leaves in the car. I don't care if you know them or not. We have absolute duty to the people who are around us to help them. There's no way that I'm running away in a car with a kid in it. It's going to be over my body. And then you've got to be somebody else or protect your own children. And you see who ends up in the vehicle. And that's why I talk about the carjacking scenarios being so critical to understand. Is it because I'm myself or am I my family and they're into the car? Because we see this on multiple attackers that run, multiple attackers pretty much from the back, left. The guy is more about whatever the heck is in his hand, holding his pants up, than he is trying to take the back of the car. And shame anybody that would ever walk out of a scenario, because these guys could have easily jumped in and took off. Two kids are, I mean, what do we do? You know, make that conscious decision now. We're going to do everything you can to protect children, no matter who's coming up with the vehicle. So you can clearly see this is just an enabler, guys. It can't really happen everywhere. And you want to be prepared. The other reason that I always talk about your keys in pocket and secure. Do not ever leave keys in the vehicle with your children in there, anybody else that dropped into the vehicle, because you're leaving that vulnerable for some guys to just jump in the and drive, or with your loved ones, and may or end up in a high speed chase and end up wrecking the car and killing themselves and the people that are in the vehicle. So these are just points to learn, to know, and to visualize this. Predictive thinking, well, where did those guys come from? Could I have picked up on them a little bit earlier and started to prep? Was my head in my phone? Am I scanning? Am I looking around what's going on? I mean, this is something that we have to be applying to our daily routine as we approach to and from the vehicle. This is a scenario that could literally happen to anybody. They might have just been a target of opportunity. Oh, that one looks good. Let's hit that vehicle, and just was happened to be that day. Take some accountability for what you're going to do if one of these scenarios ends up happening to you. All right, guys, that wraps up the scenarios for this episode. We saw a carjacking, some of the things that we can do better, and we saw what happens when you hit a barricade or somebody that's trying to impede your movement in a vehicle. Apply these lessons. This is the first part of what we're going to talk about when we're bugging out, bugging in, trying to understand how we're going to respond in these different situations out in an environment. I appreciate you guys sticking with us. I hope you continue to enjoy Dangerous Questions. We do training like this. We talk about gear. We talk about all this stuff, really everyday carry and everyday situations that we're in. We do it over on our website as well, crusheverything.com. Go check us out. You'll find out more follow-up stuff here. But don't forget to follow and subscribe to us on YouTube at This Is Ironclad. And I hope you guys are enjoying the show. God bless everybody, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.